Hello, I'm Dr. Pola Rosen. I'm the publisher of Education Update, and it's a pleasure to be here today with the Executive Director of the Lincoln Center Institute, Scott Noppe-Brandon. This is a great place, a mecca of learning and of music and the arts in the world. Scott, thank you for being here today with us.
Thank you.
I want to launch by asking you about the Lincoln Center Institute. It's brought the arts into the lives of students, of teachers everywhere, and it seems the mantra of the Institute is creativity, vision, enrichment, and thinking outside the box, which we all want to do. What are some of the specific programs you've founded that help teachers do this?
Well, as you just said, we work in what I like to call the ICI continuum: imagination, creativity, innovation, and how that plays out in education. And to make that available for teachers, we want to make sure that teachers from any school, locally, nationally, internationally, have access to the resources of the Institute. We've helped start schools. We've started several charter schools in the city with new visions for public schools. We've started traditional public schools, the High School for Arts, Imagination, and Inquiry, and others. And then we have a variety of programs for teachers that range from summer and school year-based professional development. We do consultancies in school districts around the country, around the world, and we provide resources online.
I know that educators come here from all over the world, and I was most impressed because I attended some of the workshops in previous years, including this year. There's such a wonderful and strong program for what teachers can do in their schools and what educators and principals can do as well. How can teachers get into your summer programs, and is there a fee?
This summer, to talk about the workshop you just viewed, we actually had teachers, educators here from 8 countries: Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, South Korea, Australia, and others. And the way in which they were here was either through what we call our International Educators Workshop, which is a fee-based workshop. And any educator can sign up to take that week-long workshop during the summer. And we had teachers here locally who participate in the schools that we're involved with throughout the year, and there's no charge for educators who come through that structure.
That's wonderful. And do you find that the teachers weave this information into their studies, into their interdisciplinary studies, or is it more for teachers who are specializing in their schools in the arts?
Historically, about 15% of the teachers who participate in LCI are arts educators. So it's kind of interesting that the answer is yes and no. We very much want to serve the arts ed community because it is of the arts, but the goal has always been to go beyond the arts and look at it from an interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary focus. So 85% of the teachers are classroom teachers, subject-specific teachers, math, science, history. And that's always, I've loved that. I've loved the notion that it's about learning. It's not just about the subject of the arts. It's about learning.
There has been a cut in funding in the arts in the past few years. Has that affected attendance at the LCI, which is LCI is Lincoln Center Institute?
The answer is yes. We've definitely seen a cut in number of schools. We've seen a cut in number of teachers. We've also seen a cut in number of teachers in their ability to participate in professional development. I don't think it's all money, though, by the way. I think it's crowded school day. I think it's accountability and standards driving the discussion of the role of the arts within education. But I also think it's teachers during the summer are busy, either teaching or doing other professional development for their work. But there's definitely been a cut in the funds that are available.
Well, you mentioned the word accountability, which makes me think about all of the testing and the metrics that are going on in the United States. Has that taken a toll as well?
The honest answer is yes.
Yeah.
I think because it crowds the question of how many subjects and what subjects are in the school day, and if you're not able to teach to it and test it, is it really of value? That said, I I don't want to blame it on that at the same time, because I think that there's an equal and opposite part of the discussion, which is, have we really shown how important the arts are and how they fit into the school day and their relevance within education? And I don't raise it to question what's been done. I raise it to say it's too easy an answer to just blame everyone else.
Sure.
We have to also look at what we're doing.
Absolutely. Scott, which of the workshops is most popular, and which is most effective, and how do you measure it? So, two-part question.
Most popular are definitely the workshops that have to do with the capacities for imaginative learning, which are learning outcomes that we developed for the High School for Arts, Imagination, and Inquiry a number of years ago. Teachers are keenly interested in how the capacities relate to learning across the curriculum. And because we've also created a series of metrics and learning indices for them, there's a sense that by learning the capacities and enacting them in the classroom, it will help students learn across the curriculum. So that's been definitely the most popular of the workshops.
Interesting. Can you expand on your work in New York City schools, including the charter schools? I'm so interested in that. And also a little bit about how the charter schools that you have been a part of, how they differ from other schools.
New Visions for Public Schools made the decision 2 years ago now, I guess, to start a number of charter schools in New York City. 4 are now open. All 4 of them are in the Bronx. And the Institute's the lead educational partner with New Visions. We're not running the schools. We're not the CMO for the schools. New Visions is, and they're great. And Ron Chowisan and Bob Hughes are just fantastic.
So do those schools have an extra dose of the arts in them in the curriculum?
We have a full-time teaching artist assigned to the schools. So in the instance of the first 2, the teaching artist is split equally between the 2 schools, the 2 sister schools, and that will happen in each of the new pairing of schools. So that's different for us, that there's literally someone on site on a daily basis from the Institute.
And does that person report back to you? So there's a communication between the Institute, the school, and you.
Absolutely. We also have program staff that interacts with the school. It's a huge investment, time-wise and education-wise, from the principals of the schools, the teachers. And the goal is to make it so this methodology, this way of learning, this idea set are part and parcel of teaching and learning across the curriculum.
Right.
But there's no opportunity to say we don't have time for it, or we don't
because
value
it's part of the school day. I remember when I went to high school here in New York City, I went to the High School of Music and Art, and we had a regular school day, but the arts, music was always, there was an extra 2 hours to the day, so you got home later. But it was and the school still exists, and now it's here near Lincoln Center.
Right.
So it's a wonderful, wonderful. I mean, I'm a great believer in the arts. Tell us something about your own mentors and how you came to devote your life to the arts.
I always love to talk about mentors.
So do I.
Right. 9th grade English teacher. About 6 to 8 weeks into the school year, called me up after class one day and said, "I'm giving you a week of detentions." And I looked at her. Her name was Mrs. Paff. And I looked at her and said, "Mrs. Paff, I didn't do anything." And she said, "Scott, that's the point." And gave me detention. And the detentions were not punitive. They were purely there to be motivational, to say, here's what you can do, let's challenge it. Here's what you're afraid to do, let's challenge it. Here's what I'd like you to think about doing, let's challenge it. And it was the most constructive moment in education that I had ever had, because someone took me seriously, someone challenged me, someone said, I'm going to invest in you in the moment, and I'm not going to make it easy. I'm not going to make it too hard, but I'm not going to make it easy all at the same time. So
you didn't feel it was a punishment, though?
Well, initially, of course, because, 9th grader, it's like, teacher singling you out. Of course I did. But no, and as I went through it and as I got to know her better, and we remained friends and colleagues for years after that, even after graduation. So I would put her in the first. I didn't see a live performance until I was 16. So the director of education, me, at Lincoln Center Institute, I didn't grow up around the arts. I I knew about the arts, obviously, but my family wasn't involved in the arts, even that interested in the arts. And so to a certain degree, it was the absence of, not the plentifulness.
But then, where did your attraction to the arts come from?
I was a horticulture and entomology major in college. And
I always loved bugs. No.
Yep, I kept bees. And I was
as long as I stay in the garden.
Right. I was late for signing up for a course, and I signed up for a course called Expanded Arts, and it was taught by a dance, theater, and visual arts professor.
This was in college?
In college.
Okay.
Had never taken an arts course in my life. Just signed up for it on a whim. Second day of class, the dance professor came up and asked me if I would join a Renaissance and Baroque dance company, and I thought she was crazy. I had no interest in it. She came back the next day, and I thought, Scott, you're going to fail this course unless you at least go look at it. I went and looked at the rehearsal for this Baroque and Renaissance dance company. Once again, had never had an interest in it. Changed my major to a dance, visual art major, and education major, and went through and spent the next 6-7 years doing undergraduate and graduate.
That is such an amazing story, which to me reverberates in the sense that you can take a student and introduce them to something new, and that can have a tremendous impact on their life. And that's exactly what happened to you. Yeah. A brand new curriculum, a brand new discipline.
Yeah, it was totally a surprise. I would never have thought that's what I was going to do.
Right. If somebody told you in high school that you'd be in this field, you would have told them they're crazy.
Now, I did have a wrestling coach in high school who taught the love of movement. So he was a finesse teacher. So to a certain degree, I always knew that movement could be fascinating. So when I became a dancer, because I did become a dancer professionally after that, it made sense to me to pursue that. The other mentors, which without a doubt, are Mark Schubart and Maxine Greene. Yeah, Mark, because I think his amazing instinct and knowledge of how you can create an institution to accomplish a mission, and Maxine, because I've had the pleasure of knowing Maxine now for 25 years, and she's a rock star in education.
She is. Maxine Greene is somebody that I know very well, and I don't know if you know, but she was when I was in graduate school at Teachers College, Columbia University, Maxine Greene was my professor, and I was in awe of her. Here she came walking in as an icon of not just intellectual life and literacy, but she wore the most magnificent clothes, and she was impeccably dressed in Diane Van Furstenberg dresses. Right. But Maxine is still around today, and she has been a great influence here at Lincoln Center. And I think that the big word that was imagination. Right. Wasn't that her?
Without a doubt. I mean, she's been our philosopher in residence since 1975. Mark met her when he started the Institute. So her philosophy of learning, and John Dewey, therefore, since she's very much a Deweyan scholar, has been part of it. And Dewey talked about, as has Maxine, about imagination as the ability to think of things as if they could be otherwise, to ask what if. Dewey talked about an aesthetic versus an anesthetic education.
I love that.
And that's been really an underlying motivation of my work, and certainly learning from and with Maxine.
I want everyone to remember that, anesthetic versus aesthetic.
It's a great image.
Phrase.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about, so we spoke about Maxine Greene. I'm not familiar with the other gentleman's name.
Mark Schubart.
Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Mark was vice president and dean of Juilliard, brought over by Lincoln Center when Lincoln Center was created to start education at Lincoln Center. So he started here in the 60s to create an education program. After many years of providing art services to schools, Mark did a study that was funded by the Carnegie Corporation. It became known as the hunting of the squiggle. And it was actually front page news of the New York Times in 1972, 1973. And to me, that's pretty extraordinary.
It is.
That a study on the arts and education was front page of the Times.
Well, let's hope it stays front page today in 2012.
Yeah, I don't think it.
A little bit hard.
Yeah.
Are there any anecdotes you'd like to share with us about teachers, students, and the Lincoln Center Institute?
That's a good question. I think the Institute's always been an organization that's tried to say, we're not trying to teach you to do the perfect plie. We're not trying to teach you to master the arts. We're not trying to teach you to be an artist. And in fact, we're much more interested in an aesthetically literate society or an aesthetically literate individual. Someone whose interest in the arts is probably more from the audience side or the receiver side of it. But you learn by doing. So our interest is in getting you engaged in the arts and getting you engaged in your unlearning experientially, but not trying to say, we're going to teach you to master the arts. I have nothing against that for the programs or ideas that want to go that route, but I'm much more interested in the kids and the students and the adults who really don't know about the arts, really don't know why the arts are of interest to them, and probably don't even know how to enter into the discussion like I didn't until I was introduced to them. So in a sense, that's an aesthetically literate experience. Yes. And I'm very interested in that side of the educational discussion.
Well, you know what this brings to my mind? We talk about beginning sports and beginning music and the arts at a very young age. And if you don't learn these things when you're very young, it becomes a little bit more difficult or too late. But you're the prime example of starting at the age of 16 and blossoming and growing into indeed a lifetime career. So it's never. So is it fair to say to the public, it's never too late?
Never too late. And quite honestly, my family, who loved me and supported me, didn't think it was a series of great decisions. They were confused by it. It seemed like, why would somebody give up the sciences and go into the arts? And why would you want to dance when you could do other things in the world? But they came to understand it over time. They came to realize that it was a conscious and deliberate choice, that it made sense, and it led to a pretty great career on top of it.
A fabulous, fabulous career. And I'm going to wrap by asking this question: why do you think the arts are vital in education? And I want you to also think about those people who are cutting the budget in the arts. So
let's stay on this for a little bit, because I think it's an important question.
Yes.
The arts are absolutely vital, and just as math and science and English, all parts of knowledge base is vital, and I don't think anybody disputes that. I don't think that's the question, or why the arts are not part of the curriculum. I think it's a different discussion around that. I think we have to start talking more and more about why imagination and creativity are important, and the arts are a natural generator of it, rather than why the arts are important. Because the problem is that if you poll the U.S. public, or if you talk to any education policy person, which I've done a lot of in the last number of years, nobody's against the arts. 93% of the U.S. population will say they believe the arts should be part of education. When you ask the question, are you willing to pay more, crowd the school day, give up something else, it drops to 20-some%. The point being is that it's not an anti-art statement necessarily. It's not sure what they really do want and how to create the kind of education that's important. If you talk to people about the role of imagination, creativity, and innovation, as it relates to economic parameters, as it relates to human development parameters, and as it relates to how we think and act as a society, then people aren't against it. Because those are not subject-based discussions, they're learning and economic-based discussions. So if we could change the question and the whole template of the argument to not are the arts important, but why are we not looking at, if we're interested in innovation, how are we going to get there? We got to backward map it to imagination, and then look at how imagination, creativity, and innovation come together. As I said, nobody's against that. It's a question then of how do you restructure the school day to accommodate it, looking at it cross-curricular, looking at cross-learning.
Yes. As you were speaking, and I couldn't agree with you more, I was thinking about Albert Schweitzer, who to me is the essential combination of science, medicine, and the arts. And he used to come to after he founded the clinic in Lambarene, Africa, he would come to the United States and play the organ all over the country to raise money for the clinic in Lambarene. I'm sure the arts were a great part of his imagination and his life.
Sure
and I, you know, if people would consider it that way, I think that framework is invaluable.
There's a huge and important relationship between scientific inquiry and aesthetic inquiry, scientific literacy and aesthetic literacy. I mean, we shouldn't be separating those out. We should look at them as cross-current questions, which I think, once again, by looking at it through imagination and creativity and innovation lens, allows us to open that up. If we look at it as math, science, history, the arts, it's a more difficult discussion to get into, just because we have to, we get back to the question of, are we teaching knowledge alone, or are we teaching how to learn, or the combination of them?
Right. Well, Scott, thank you so much for helping us understand better the role of the arts in education, a vital question that, and we should always think about your answer to some of your wonderful answers to those questions. Thank you for letting us come today.
Thank you for the work of Education Update and what you've been doing for so many years. Thank you.
Thank you.